At least up here in the Northeast, the one thing you're going to find is the high school baseball and softball seasons are extremely short. They can literally be 5 weeks. And that can be very difficult to perform a self-assessment on yourself as a player. You know what you were in the summertime, you know what you were in the fall, you know what you did in the off season, and now the season starts. Maybe you struck out the first 5 times. Maybe you walked 4 hitters in the first inning of your game on the mound. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad player. Doesn't even mean you're having a bad season. It's a very, very small sample size. And I look at high school schedules all the time, especially for a hitter. You may have a game Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Okay? You may play in 2 of those games. You may get 5 at-bats. 5 at-bats is not a slump. 5 at-bats is not hot. 5 at-bats is almost nothing in the real world of baseball, but that's the world we live in with high school baseball and softball due to the scheduling. So what happens? Everything gets over magnified. If you have a home run or if you have 2 strikeouts that day, you're either, consider yourself that you're off to a D1 scholarship or, you're probably not going to start the next game. You can't take it that way. You have to trust what you've done in the past, especially on a metric side. If you have your run times, your exit velos, your miles per hour, that's probably not going to change if you came into the season in shape. So depending on how you're doing during the season, on your personal assessment, when we talked earlier in this series about contacting the college coaches, if you're contacting D1, D2, D3 college coaches at this point and you're only hearing from D3 college coaches, then you're probably a D3 player. If you're hearing mostly from middle-of-the-road D2s, that's probably where you are. Again, we always put the caveat in that that's where you are right now. If you pick up 10 miles an hour in 2 months, you could be something different. But it's definitely time to start to hone in on how you're doing as a player, kind of where you're headed. Now, that doesn't mean you're stuck there if you're not happy, but most importantly, what are you going to do to change things? Meaning, if you're 80 miles an hour, if you were an 80-mile-an-hour pitcher in the off season, and now you're in the high school season, you're 80 miles an hour, and you're not happy with that, you're not happy with your results, you're not happy with the colleges you're hearing from, if you don't change anything and just transition into your summer team and then into your fall team, you're going to stay the same, and eventually you're going to start to go down because as you start to fatigue, your results are going to start to definitely wane. So it's definitely time to, I don't want to say have an honest assessment, but be honest about how you're doing, and not just results-wise, not just a hit today or a strikeout tomorrow, taken in the grand scheme of things, and not even batting averages. The batting averages, we can talk about that forever, but it really comes down to hard hit balls. Are you hitting the ball hard? If it's not fair to come home and say, well, I went 0 for 2 today, if you lined out to the third baseman and lined out to center, okay? Obviously, those cheap base hits, we definitely like those. They count in the stat column. But be honest about yourself, and unfortunately, it's not as easy to just go to a batting average or an earned run average. But if you're honest with yourself about what you expect out of yourself, I think to be able to gauge your performance will be a lot easier for you. One of the challenges in today's game is dealing with playing for multiple coaches. Years ago, it wasn't always that way. I can speak for myself. It was your high school coach, and that was usually the most important and only coach you would deal with. Today's player, baseball or softball, has multiple coaches they have to deal with. You may have a private hitting coach, a private pitching coach, a high school coach, a summer league coach, a fall league coach, and that's not to mention strength and conditioning, nutritionists, and your other support system. It can be very tricky as to how you're going to handle the relationships with these different coaches. Number one, I think the number one thing is to be respectful of each coach when you're with that coach. Meaning, if I'm with my high school coach, he's in charge or she's in charge, and I'm going to follow the rules of that team. I'm going to follow the ideals of that team. I'm going to follow what's being taught on that team. Meaning, not the time for me to bring up how my summer coach does it, how my fall coach does it, or what my private hitting coach says or private pitching coach says, because all the coaches are there, they're trying to help you. And in baseball, you can achieve positive results with different training methods. So your hitting coach, private hitting coach, may teach it differently than your high school coach, who may teach it differently than your summer coach. And there can be a lot of headbutting back and forth between the players and even the coaches. I think the best thing for a player to do is, and I always say this when I train my players, I want you to own your swing. I want you to own your pitching delivery. So it's not my swing that you're trying to use. You're developing your own swing. So if you have what you consider to be your own swing or your own delivery, then you're relying less and less on the different coaches to maybe tweak that or tinker with that or alter that. And that is something that a lot of my players that I train are worried about, is that a different coach is going to want to change something. And what I say to them is the number one way to make sure coaches are hands off is to have success. Meaning, if you're going out and throwing strikes and throwing hard, or if you're hitting the ball hard, most likely they're not going to tweak or try to change your swing. But I've also said to players, when you're going bad, I would want to change your swing, or I would want to change your delivery. So is there a right or wrong? No. I think you want to be respectful of all the different coaches, and I think different coaches have different personalities. Some are going to be more assertive, some are going to be more passive. The player may respond better to a certain type of coaching, but I think staying in the season, trusting the coach you're with, you obviously can communicate, and those coaches communicate with each other, but I think when you're in season, that is the best way to handle scheduling or innings limits. I don't think you're going to run into a lot of problems. And I do think you'll find most coaches are respectful of other coaches in season, meaning I would be shocked if your summer coach was calling your high school coach in season saying X, Y, and Z, unless it was strictly for planning purposes. So stay respectful, and remember, use it as a positive. You can learn something from all of your different coaches, but you definitely want to know that whoever you're with in that season generally will take priority. If you enjoyed the video, please let us know by leaving a like. If you have a question you'd like answered, please leave it below in the comment section. If you want to catch more of this content, make sure you follow or subscribe so you don't miss out on anything. Thank you. See you next week.